It's Thursday. So, this is another episode of The Garden. And I'm so glad that you're here. I'm your host, Taryn Balzana. And this is a place where you don't have to come alone because we're all growing too. Today's episode might step on some toes. But that's okay. Because those are the ones we often need to hear the most. And as always, this is just as much for me as it is for you. And that's always the place that I'm coming from with these, is because this is a lesson that I learned lately or have been needing to learn lately. And so no better place to speak to you from than a place where I also was just coming from or am coming from. Because then the passion's there and you're really just going to get the full message. But this one might be a little shorter. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. But I think it has a little powerful punch in it that might make us a little uncomfortable. So, starting out in Philippians 1:15 through 18. Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. We're really going to get right into it. The world hating on Christianity is what it is. It's normal. Jesus said, if the world hates you, remember it hated me first. What is most sad, though, is that more often than not, the hate comes from fellow Christians. Christians are so quick to judge the heart of another based on one post or one comment or one share of something. I wish as a church we were more quick to rejoice when we see other people posting, preaching, and proclaiming the message we believe and find hope in. Sometimes I sit there and I wonder why people do put so much stock into other people. I mean, we're all human at the end of the day. There is no one that will preach perfectly every single time. There's no one that you're going to agree with every single time. I mean, let's face it, if that were possible, we wouldn't have as many denominations as we do. As many churches with barely different titles. People like to split hairs over the tiniest of things. We're all guilty of it, whether we want to admit it or not. We're quick to write off a pastor because he doesn't preach how we think he should. Yet God called him to preach, not you. If you are the one sitting in the pew. We'll write off pastor after pastor, and I think when most people do that, it's because they're putting the dependency of their faith and relationship with God into the hands of other people. And if you're going to put something like that into the hands of other people, you're going to be disappointed because it's only meant to be in your hands. You are responsible for your own walk with the Lord, and you are responsible for what you get fed. At the end of the day, you can go to church every single day, but it does not fill in for studying the Word on your own. Podcasts do not fill in for studying the Word on your own. Worship music does not fill in for studying the Word on your own. Those are additions to the relationship and the foundation you should already have or be building on your own. Oftentimes people have an opinion on preaching because they didn't like the sound of it. Rarely because of the fact that they actually studied on their own and they realized it was maybe preached out of context or something. We hear verses our whole life, one verse at a time, so rarely hearing the full context and meaning behind it. So instead of studying on our own, we romanticize it and assume our own meaning. Then when we hear it actually preached the right way, we don't like it when we find out our assumption of what that verse meant is not at all the context in which it was written. But it's easier to say they're wrong instead of admitting that we were. Right? Here's some verses that are frequently taken out of context and misunderstood. Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." We're all familiar with that one, right? This verse was first on the list because it's so frequently taken out of context. Remember, this verse wasn't written in a context of God speaking directly to you, the modern day reader. It's a promise God gives to his entire chosen people. In Jeremiah, God's promising the Hebrews who are held captive in Babylon that he's bringing them freedom. The prosperity here is about their practical, physical needs. It's not about modern readers magically becoming affluent just because they believe in God. This verse may also have a harsh edge when shared out of context for someone with a chronic ailment. This verse can be prescribed to offer magical healing. However, when a misunderstood promise doesn't come to pass, people's faith can be weakened. All because they didn't know the whole message. Or Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This verse shows up frequently in athletic environments, from Steph Curry writing the verse on his shoes to Tim Tebow referencing the verse on his face stickers. The insinuation is that professional athletes will have a competitive edge because they believe in Jesus. However, in context, Paul writes this while awaiting trial and a potential execution for preaching about Jesus' resurrection. Paul is encouraging the Philippine church to endure their suffering by remembering that Christ, who overcame death, is the source of their strength. It's about finding an inner strength when you're enduring spiritual adversity, not about being magically blessed with an athletic or professional competitive edge. 1 Corinthians 13:4. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant. That's a wedding staple, used as an instruction manual for those in relationships. While certainly this wisdom is helpful for couples, the application here is far broader. Paul's writing to the entire church in Corinth with this advice. Single or coupled, we are to love everyone in our community with this radical approach. And that's just to name a few. Think of how many others there are. Church is the most common place we think we know better. But it's not the only place. How often do you go to a restaurant and say, I could run this place better? Could you, though? Have you ever even ran a business, let alone a restaurant business? How about thinking you could parent someone else's kids better? Or, if they would have just done blank, the marriage would have worked. Stepping on any toes yet? We make assumptions, and there's a saying about assumptions that I'm not going to repeat, but I'm pretty sure we all know it. We make assumptions without knowing the full story, without knowing the context. It's a dangerous game to play, acting like we know better. And more often than not, we just end up looking like fools. It's pretty embarrassing when you think you know something and you're standing firm in it and confident in it, and you get humbled real quick. when you learn that that's not at all what happened or what that person meant. It's like arguing with someone over text is probably the worst thing that you could do, because you can't understand how they're saying it, and it's gonna get taken the wrong way because you can't see their facial expressions and you can't hear their tone of voice. And we look at ourselves, and we are the church. We are the people sitting in the pews. And we wonder why other people have a hard time coming in the door. Because they walk in and they hear how you don't like how Susie Q wipes off the tables, or you don't like how the color that the walls are painted, or that we have pews instead of chairs, or you didn't like that pastor wore this to church. And we really have no room to say any of that. It's so insignificant. There are much bigger problems. But people come in and they hear all that, and then they want to walk right back out. And I can't say that I blame them. If I was someone who wasn't able to look past that. But fortunately I can, but there's a lot of people that can't. We're setting an example. And as followers of Jesus, we're supposed to be like Jesus. And so I don't just mean when you're listening to a sermon and it doesn't line up completely with what you believe because you studied wrong or didn't study at all. I'm talking about all the things in life where we make assumptions about and make up our own conclusions about when we don't even know the real story, or we don't even know the context. Context is so important in so many aspects of life. And it can be very detrimental when you take an action without it. And so I just want to encourage you to make sure you know the context before you state your opinion. To anyone. Even out loud. Make sure you know what you're saying first. And know that whatever you're saying, whenever you're saying it, people are listening. And when you think no one heard what you said about whoever or whatever, I promise you someone did. And it's gonna stick with them. So make sure it's something good. That's all. That's all I got for you. A shorter episode, but a needed episode. A little reminder, a little encouragement to make sure that we're spreading more Jesus than humanity. I love you guys so much, and I hope you have the best rest of your day. And thank you so much for being here and tuning in. And all of your feedback and your comments and all the things. It means more to me than you know. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.